So, welcome to the October Forum. This is a follow up to the National Livelox subscription that Blake and I worked through last fall and presented to the board to purchase a Livelox subscription for the Orienteering USA for 2024. Um, so, one note, Blake is in Florida at the moment, hoping for the best with the hurricane, but if something does happen with Blake has to jump off, I will attempt to pick up where he left off. But yeah, Blake has some data that we've been gathering from Livelox, and Livelox has provided us some data. So um, we'll share that data and then go through some of Blake's experience using Livelox. So Blake, if you want to take it away.
You bet. So absolutely. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for stopping in and joining us for this forum call. Just to begin, one little housekeeping item. I think we did this the last time I did a Livelox presentation. I'm going to be sharing with you some somewhat detailed screenshots and images and so forth, and you want to be able to see as much detail on as you can. In order to do that on your Google Meet, I suggest you do the following things. First of all, if you have your chat window open, I would suggest that you close it. You can come down here and click on the chat button here or the X up here, and that'll take that little bit of the screen real estate and give it back to you. And then after that, come to the three dots menu down here at the bottom. And inside that, there is a change layout option at the top. And you might want to try using the spotlight option. That'll kind of clear other things away and use as much of the window as it can for the share, the screen share that I'm going to be transmitting. And then finally, also in the three dots menu, there is a full screen option, which should even take away the little bit of header at the top, as much screen real estate as you got. So those three things: the chat window, the change layout, the spotlight, and then full screen mode. So now that I've shown that, I can stop sharing and start sharing again on the screen I'm really going to use and get rid of all that infinity mess that you had there. As Dylan mentioned, I am in Florida and pretty much right in the path of Hurricane Milton, almost in the path of it. So if you hear any weather noises in the background, that's what's going on. We passed through the major outer rain band an hour or so ago, but we have tropical storm force winds outside. So apologize for that. Can't do anything about that. But hopefully it'll be quiet enough you won't be able to hear too much of it. So I've got a few different topics to cover. We did a Livelox forum back in, I guess it was in December or January when we first had the national subscription, and we wanted to get some information out there about how Livelox works and what you can do with it and so forth. We went through a number of topics, and basically what we're going to do here is give an update on that. And I have a few different topics that I want to cover. If I can get my PowerPoint to re-engage for me here. There we go. So here's the topics I want to get to. First of all, Dylan mentioned that we've been gathering some usage stats from Livelox to give us an idea of how much people are using the system, how many people are recording, how many folks are actually taking advantage of the analysis pages after the fact to go and study their tracks and compare them to tracks of others and so forth. So we're going to go through that, give you an idea of how much we're using the product, and it's all good news as far as I'm concerned. I'm going to spend a moment talking about adoption patterns within clubs. Of course, the clubs that I'm most familiar with are my own, Florida Orienteering and Suncoast Orienteering. Those are the ones I have good statistics and history on. So I'll just give you a quick overview of what that looks like and what the adoption progression tends to be in a club. Next, I'll show you a couple of demo reels that I've made from two showpiece events in 2024 to give you an idea of what Livelox can produce if you get a good number of people adopting it, a good number of people actually using it. There are a couple of new features that Livelox has released since the last time we talked, and I'm going to show those to you. And then finally, we're going to talk about showcasing the live tracking feature at events. This is what, for us, is one of the biggest drivers of getting people to adopt, by showing them at the event itself what Livelox is capable of doing, and getting people around the screen and talking about it and chattering about what they did out on their courses. This is one of the best ways to get people who haven't tried Livelox yet to say, hey, I need to get in on that, and get them to adopt. And I've got a couple of pictures of some large displays of how to get that in front of as many people as you can. And I've even done some experimenting with a projector. I'll show you a couple of screenshots of that. So this is the progression of what I want to try and run through. First, let's start with the stats. And we'll talk first about who's recording and how much they're recording. And this is the overall summary. So far in year-to-date 2024, we've had 466 events in the US that have used Livelox in some fashion. Livelox tells us that a little over 1,000 individual users have recorded routes, and they've recorded a little over 8,000 routes. I'm a little suspicious of this middle number, frankly. The 8,000 I can verify, because I can go to the screen myself in Livelox and download how many routes got created for each event and so forth. I can verify this total. But the number of recorders sounds a little low to me, simply because that means, if this number is right, that each person's recorded 7 or 8 routes per year. And I'm guessing that just sounds a little high to me. It could be wrong, but it sounds a little bit fishy. So this number might be a little bit bigger than what they're telling us. I'm not 100% confident, but that's my impression. This is the map of where the events have occurred that have used Livelox. You can see they're concentrated in the areas of a few different clubs. Each one of these circles is an event, and the number that's in it is the number of routes that were recorded at that event. As you can see, many of them are just onesie twosie, right? There's a few events that have less than 10 tracks recorded. And then there's some other events that have maybe 50 or 70 routes recorded. Here's one with over 100. I think the Nationals up here has over 100 routes recorded. And then, of course, we've had some bigger events down here because we're sort of pioneers in the adoption of Livelox. But many of these are smaller, right? And many of the events have been set up, but only a few people so far have adopted the technology and actually tried it out. This is the kind of club by club who's using the system to record the most. And it's just a bar chart by club down here indicating the number of routes recorded in the first 3 quarters. And I've color coded it by the time of year, from hot to cold, to give us an idea of whether they're primarily winter or spring or summer events. And just a couple of highlights here. You can see, I don't know if Gord's on this call yet or not, but he's the Ice King. He had over 1,000 routes recorded at his events in January, February, and March this year. Florida Orienteering is right behind him. We actually missed our February and March events this year due to some park shenanigans, so we're a little bit behind, but we had some good routes recorded in January, and also our state championships event in April was pretty big. Then we have several other clubs, Cincinnati, Georgia, Cascade, Backwoods, all recorded 500 to 600 routes so far this year. Grizzly Orienteering recorded about 400. And then we have a whole group of clubs after that, starting with Los Angeles, that have recorded somewhere between 1 and 200 routes over the course of the year. And then another progression of clubs that have sort of dabbled in Livelox. They've just gotten started in it and have recorded anywhere from a dozen to 100 tracks over the course of the year. Now let's look at the page visits. This is who is used, or how much a given page has been used for analytics after the event itself has taken place, and it gives an idea of who's using the system for what and how often. So here's the tabular data if you're a numbers person, and if you want the single number KPI for the year, that's it right there. We've had 54,425 page hits on various Livelox pages throughout the course of the first 3 quarters. And the numbers here show how they break down, and this is just the same information graphically. And you can see there's 5 basic pages that they track. There's the results table, which has a small amount of traffic here at the top. There's the route editor, which has almost no traffic. You can see a tiny little thin line of red here and here. Maybe 1 or 2 people, I'm guessing, are using the route editor, but that's very uncommon. The lion's share of the traffic, of course, is the green, which is the player. This is the one you use for playing back the event after the fact and watching either a selection of routes or all the routes. That's the lion's share of the traffic. It's, as you can see, 44,000 out of the 54,000 total are hits on the player. Then the leg view is probably the next most common one. We talked about this a good bit in the first forum call for Livelox. This is the one where you can go leg by leg and see all the different routes that each person recorded for that leg, color-coded by how fast they worked. So you can see the kind of the spectrum of what approaches people took and which ones worked out the best. That's the leg view. And then finally, the dual. This is the one where you isolate your track and one other person's track, and it will diagram them out and give you detailed information about how much time you gained and lost on different parts of the leg. That's the dual feature. And so that's how much each of these is being used. You can see that initially we started out at a kind of a lower level and grew quickly over February and March into somewhere around 7,000 to 9,000 hits a month. And then there's this sudden drop off in July and August. And I think that's probably because the Southern clubs, I know that Florida Orienteering and Suncoast both shut down during July and August for obvious reasons. I think Georgia Orienteering probably does too. And there may be some other clubs that do the same. So it's probably not uncommon that we'll see kind of a large drop in traffic during those hottest summer months as those clubs cease events, and then we'll pick up again toward the end of the year. So I expect we'll get back to more like this normal 7,000 to 9,000 hits a month level of traffic over the rest of the year in Q4. Okay, so that's the statistics that we got from Livelox. Now I want to talk about the adoption curve, if you will, how clubs kind of progress from introducing Livelox to getting a few people to use it, to getting that critical mass where a lot of people start using it, and then grow on from there to get as many folks using it as we can. And as I said, I've got good data for this for flow and soar. So this is what I'm showing you here. What you're looking at is sort of a complex chart here, but I'm going to ignore most of it. These are events starting in 2017 to current. And what you're looking at here, the blue curve here is the number of runners we had at that event. The orange is the number of Livelox routes recorded. And then these little dots in between are the percentage, right? What fraction of runners recorded that's listed out on the secondary axis here. And then the thing I really want to draw your attention to is the bold pink or magenta curve here, which is the rolling average, five event average of those percentages. So that pink curve here, you should read out on the secondary axis here. It's showing you the fraction of runners who use Livelox at any given event. And you can see that we started out years ago introducing Livelox, and we had maybe 10 or 15% of people using it. And then this is the progression over the years, the last 5 or 6 years, of how that has grown over time. And there are a few things to point out. One is that about 3 to 4 years ago, we were at maybe 25% adoption. The year before last, we made it up to 40% as we really began promoting it and people began understanding what Livelox could do for them. And then last year, of course, when we got the national subscription and we really wanted to showcase it and get people to use it while it was free, we made a big push to get people to adopt it more. And we made it to almost 60% average usage across the two clubs during the prior season. You'll notice that in any given season, there's a little cyclical nature to it. When the season begins, there's a downturn in the adoption rate, and that's because we are heavily JROTC our participant base is largely JROTC, and every year we get a fresh crop of freshmen in who haven't used Livelox before. They start out not using it, and then over the course of the season, we educate them, we get them on board, they start to use the product. So each season we see a dip and then a gradual growth throughout the year. And then by the end of the season, by the time we get to the state championship event, we're kind of at our peak adoption rate for the season. There are a few individual events that have been really spectacular for us. Each year we hold a training camp at Camp Blanding, which absolutely mandates that we have GPS tracking on everybody who's there. And so at those events, that's these three right here, we typically get very high adoption. 80 to 90% of our participants are using Livelox. And then this one here happens to be the Air Force JROTC National Championship that Gord hosted this year. We had a huge adoption there. We made a big push to get them to use it, and they did. We got something like 87%, I think, from that one used Livelox. And then this one here, this last one, is my personal favorite. You'll notice that it has a very large number of participants. Over 400 people came to this event, and we had something like almost 300 of them recorded routes. So we made it to almost 3 out of 4. That was our state championship event at Silver Springs. And I'm going to show you some more detail on that one in a minute. We're really happy about it. All right, new Livelox features. There's two that I want to point out. The first one, which is very mundane, but it's extremely helpful, is the playback settings now has a memory to it. Once you set up your settings, it remembers them from the last time you logged in, the last time you used the system, so you don't have to keep setting them over and over and over again. The settings are this little pull out here. I'll show you how to get to it in a moment. But all these things are things that you can use to tweak the playback display or the live tracking display. And now you no longer have to reset them every time you open the window, or every time you switch to a new course, or every time you refresh. It remembers the settings, which is fantastic. The second new feature is the heat map. Livelox can now generate a heat map that shows where all your participants went on the map, similar to the heat map that was popularized by Strava. I think a lot of you may have had some exposure to that. You can now generate heat maps from Livelox route data, and I'll show you how to do that. So the first one is the settings memory. This is the playback screen in all its glory here. You have your main viewing window over here. You have your list of runners on this side. And then over here is where the settings are. The settings is a pullout that comes out of this little menu icon here in the top right. And these are the settings that you can play with. And the good news is that now when you play with these, when you set them up, you tweak all of these out the way you want them to get the display to show the way you want it to. It will remember that. And every time you open the window, every time you switch course, every time you refresh, it'll default back to that same set of settings. You don't have to reset them. That was a problem that was somewhat annoying in the past because it was not an uncommon thing for you to switch from one course to another or refresh the display or something of that nature, and you have to go reset all your settings, and now you don't anymore. There is also a little restore to default link down here at the bottom. If you get tired of the defaults that you've set, the memory you've set, you can click that. It'll wipe the memory clean and go back to the defaults. The second new feature is the heat map. It's something that the event manager or event director can do, not just any participant. So if you are the person who sets up the event for your club, you can get into the manage events for any particular event you want. And if you scroll down to the actions menu down here at the bottom, you'll see a new item has appeared here for download route heat map. And so all you do is after the event's over, you come into the manage, you look down here in actions, you click on that link, and it will generate that heat map image and suck it down to your machine as a PNG image that you can then look at and share. Here's an example of what one looks like. This is that showpiece event at Silver Springs that I made mention of a moment ago, where we had something like 400 runners and 300 tracks recorded. This is the heat map for that event. And a few things to point out here. Most obvious is all of these rays that you see here sticking out. This is the staging area right down here. You can see where all the trails kind of come back together. This is the start and finish. And what ends up happening is people are hanging around in the start corral and they pull out their phone and they open up Livelox and they're getting ready to go. So they start recording. And at that point, Livelox is locking onto their location with the GPS chip, but it doesn't lock on instantaneously, right? The GPS takes a few seconds to lock onto your position. And then those first couple of seconds, the lock isn't great. It doesn't know your exact location yet. So it puts you somewhere else, right? Somewhere out here or over here. And then as it locks your position, it zooms down to, zips down to the correct location. And you end up with these flyaways that show up on the track. They're very transitory. They just appear for a few seconds. You can actually see them in playback mode as well. If you play back an event, you'll see a lot of these flyaways that will appear and disappear. They don't stay long because that period of time where you don't have a solid lock yet is only a few seconds long. But unfortunately, it muddies the waters on the heat map, those little rays. And Livelox is working on that. That's a known problem they're aware of, and they're trying to work out some way to exclude those. Kind of zooming in on this a little bit, you can see that it's a little bit grainy down at the level of this level of zoom, but it works the same as as any other heat map, or especially the Strava heat map. Occasional traffic, like you see over here, there's just one or two people making these routes, shows up as kind of a thin pink color on the heat map. And then as you start accumulating more routes in a given area, if a whole bunch of people cross a given area, those little pinks start to accumulate into a deeper red, indicating that more people have had traffic in that area. And then, of course, your major arteries, the trails that people are moving back and forth on, will be colored either a very deep red or sometimes even a black, as you see here. If you zoom out on a heat map, it looks better than when you zoom in. And when you zoom in, it looks kind of grainy. But if you take a larger area and zoom out on it, it can actually be pretty exciting. This is the heat map that Livelox generated for the 2023 Orienteering event. So what you're looking at here is about 6,000 Livelox tracks out of the 12,000 participants or so who came to that, competed in that event. But it produces quite a striking image when you zoom out on it a little bit. By the way, when I'm in this presentation mode, I can't see the chat window. So if anybody has any questions at any point, feel free to pipe up and ask. If you put it in the chat, I won't be able to see it until I finish. So just unmute yourself and ask the question if you have one. No problem. All right, next topic, displaying the live tracking. This is super important for adoption because until people see it, they're not all that excited about it. It's just another app for them to install and some more steps for them to take. Until they see what it can do for them, they're just not that excited about it. So you want to get the imagery and get the route tracking and the overlay on the map. You want to get that in front of them. You want to get it under their eyes, even if it's other people's tracks they're looking at. That's good enough, right? They can see then what they're missing, and then they have the motivation to go through the steps, install the app, get the setup done, and start using it. So I really highly recommend that you do this in order to get people to adopt it. So I'm going to show you the details of how we do this at Flow and SOAR events and how you can do it at your events as well. There's a tiny little bit of minor setup that you do on an event when you're creating it in order to prep for the best kind of display. So this is the setup. I'm looking here obviously at the setup screen, the manage event screen. And again, I'm looking at the Silver Springs event, that showpiece event I was showing you the heat map of a moment ago. And at this point, I've got all my event stuff set up. I've got all my event details here. I've uploaded the map. I've uploaded the courses. I've set up the classes. That's all in here. Once you reach that point, you're going to scroll down here to the classes section and click on edit. And inside there, there's just one thing you want to add in order to make the Livelox live tracking really pop. And that is to use the colors for the all participants replay mode. So you check this little box right here that says use colors. And then you're going to come over here and pick which colors you want for each class to show on the display. So here you have a listing of all your different classes right here, the class and the corresponding course name. And there's a little box next to each one of them. You just click on this box and it brings up a color picker, and you can choose the color you want for each one of these. Now, Florida orienteering clubs, both Flow and SOAR, are still using the old school color courses, yellow, orange, green, red, blue. If you use a course name that has a color embedded in it, Livelox is smart enough to actually auto-pick the matching color for you. So these will already be kind of filled in, and all you have to do is tweak them. If you're using some other naming convention, then you would have to pick the colors that you want. And whatever colors you settle on, I highly recommend that you kind of pick up a set and settle on a standard so that event after event after event, the colors mean the same thing. Regardless of which event they're at. That way people can learn to read the display more quickly. But as you can see here, we're using the old school color naming system, green, orange, yellow, blue, and the corresponding colors are here. I will often use, if I have a gender split, as we did for the state championships, there's a separate female course from male course at each color level. I'll often pick a lighter shade of the color for the female so that I can tell the male and female apart on the display. Obviously, you don't have to do that, but it's just something that I typically do because I kind of like being able to tell the difference. And that's the whole setup. You just need to choose to activate the colors and then set the colors. Then when you're actually at the event, and you're ready to display the live tracking, here's what you do. You would log into your club's account on Livelox and come to My Club's Events right here, and it'll show the details of the event, the little thumbnail of the map, the courses or classes that you have there. And then there's this button for Show down here, which gives you the display. So you would open up My Club's Events, pick the event that you're at, and click on Show. That will then bring up a choice list of all the classes you have available and say, okay, which one do you want me to show? And there'll be a Show Live button next to them. You can pick any active course and click on the Show Live. Once you've done that, you'll get the display page. And on the left-hand side, there's a little drop down up here, which is the one you use to switch from one class to another. If you're actively watching, you can flip between green and orange and yellow, depending on what you want to look at the time. But as we've discussed in the past, there's now this new one in the drop-down called All Participants. If you click on this drop-down right there, that's the one you want to display, because that's the one that shows everybody on all courses overlaid on the master map. So it gives you a single display that you can put up that has everyone on it overlaid on the master map. Once you pick that, you're going to want to use that settings panel, whose new memory function I showed you earlier. On the display screen at the top right, you have this burger stack menu button. You'll click on it and click on Show Settings Panel to pull out the settings list. This is what allows you to tweak the display, to tune it to whatever you want, to kind of make it look the way you want it to look. And I'm going to give you some ideas on how I think you should set it up. And basically, there's two phases here, right? When you're in the process of running an event, there's a period of time where you're still releasing people onto their courses, right? The start corral has people in it, and there are people waiting to go to the start corral and waiting to start. During that part of the event, you don't really want to put too much information on the live tracking display, because you don't want somebody who hasn't started yet to be able to get into the finish area and look at that display and glean, get a preview of some kind about the course they're about to run. So initially you have to redact a degree of information from the live tracking display until the last starters have been released. And then you can go back and add the redacted information back in. So it's this two-phase approach. So during the start window, when you're still actively releasing people and there's folks milling around who haven't gone out on their course yet, here's how I recommend you set things up. I recommend you dial the course opacity slider all the way down to 0. That means all the control locations will disappear from the display. You want to set the tail style to monochrome, not class color, so that they can't tell who's on what course. You want to set the tail length down to 0 here, so there's no tails. They'll be able to see people's exact current position, but not anywhere that they've been. And then finally, you want to uncheck the box next to Show Names next to Markers, so that you can't tell who's who. When you do all of that, this is what the display looks like. Right? You've got the map, and you have the live locations of each person out there who's using Livelox to record, but you got no control locations, you got no routes, you got no course IDs, you can't tell who's who. So even if somebody sneaks into the finish area who hasn't started their course yet, even if they look at this thing, they really can't get any useful information from it about what their course is going to be like or where their controls are going to be located. But you can still show at least a little bit of live action to folks who have come back and want to see what's going on out there. After the last starters have left, then you can put all the good stuff back in. So you're going to go to those same 4 settings and turn them all back on, right? You're going to dial the course opacity up so you can see the control locations. You're going to switch the tail style to color by class, so it will color code each person's track to show which course they're actually running. You can dial up the tail length to show 1 to 5 minutes, whatever suits your taste of where each person has been. We usually set it to 5 minutes. And then you check the box for Show Names, so it'll put some little initials next to each avatar so you can tell who's who. When you put those in, this is what you get. And now you've got all the redacted information back in, and now orienteering is a spectator sport. So people can kind of gather around the the live results display. They can see who's who and what course they're on, where they are, and where they've been, and kind of follow the progress of their teammates or rivals as they're out on their course. This is the one that really draws people's attention, of course, because it's got all the good stuff back in. All right, now let's talk about how to display this thing. You can, of course, put this on any monitor. When we started out with this years ago, when we were just beginning with it, I just bought a 24-inch monitor from Goodwill and stuck that in front of people, and they all have to kind of crowd around it and look at it. A few years ago, we started using a 50-inch flat screen TV for this purpose, which is what's pictured here. We've been using that for about 5 years as our primary results display. And basically, in order to use it, I do this. I create a browser window that I put on that screen with 2 tabs, one for the event system results and one for Livelox live tracking. And if you use the Control-Shift-2 keystroke, it will split the screen in half and give half of the screen real estate to each window. And then you can adjust it as you see fit after that. What you're looking at here, this is a shot from our urban orienteering event on the USF Tampa campus last year. And these folks are actually visiting Swedes who came in for the tour. They came over for a week and ran some events in the Caribbean and ran 3 events from Flow and Soar while they were here. And they're all gathered around the screen looking at it, watching where their peers are. If you look closely here, you can see this is barely started, right? There's only a couple of people in, so we're still in that, we're still releasing starters phase. So what you see here is that first version of the display that I talked about, where we've redacted all the good stuff and left them just with live locations, unidentifiable, no name tags. That's what they're looking at here. And the 50-inch TV is great. I called that the big screen for a number of years. And it does allow a small crowd to gather around it. But as you can see, when people want to look at details up on the Livelox screen, they still get in close. And then people are kind of looking over their shoulders and craning their necks and so forth. I had to hold the phone up high in order to get this shot from behind them. So there's only so many people you can get around it. So now I call this the little screen because now I'm using a projector. I've started experimenting with using a projector for the actual big screen where I show the event results and Livelox results. I ended up buying a 3500 lumen HD short throw projector at Black Friday sales last year, and I've been playing with it ever since. Initially, we got this for another purpose. We got it because we've been doing a lot more larger trainings where we needed the bigger screen to show our PowerPoint slide decks and so forth. This happens to be the Jay Rotzi Basic Leadership Training Camp at Camp Flaming Arrow that we host every August here in our area, and there are others. There are other training camps where we have comparable size crowds. And so the projector was initially for that, but it can double up as a very nice display on a much larger screen that can get a larger crowd of people around it under the right conditions, right? We're outdoors, and so our big problem is light pollution out there. Projector can be hard to see in the outdoors, but it can support that larger spectator crowd. This shot right here is from that Silver Springs event, the one I've been showcasing for you. And here you can see, again, that first phase. We have a certain number of people who are back. Some results are showing here on the left-hand side. These are some of the people who have run their course and come back. And you can see the redacted version of the display here showing just the live positions and nothing else. This particular picture Doesn't quite do the screen justice. It's actually a little bit less washed out in real life than what you see in this photo. But you can clearly see that that's the main problem, that if you have too much light, too much ambient light, it can be hard to see the projector image. And we'll talk about how to mitigate that. So here's some of the best practices for if you want to experiment with trying a projector. First, start out with the brightest projector you can get. We already know that being able to see it in the ambient light of the outdoors is going to be the hard part. So don't start with a dim projector. You'll just be disappointed. I would recommend a 3000 lumen as a minimum. And if you can get one that's brighter, so much the better. The brighter you can get, the more conditions you'll be able to use it in. Second, I would highly urge you to get a short throw projector. Projectors come in two flavors, standard throw and short throw. The short throw basically has a fisheye sort of lens on it, where it can project a large image from only a few feet away from the screen. In this case, you can actually see where the projector is. This tiny little corner right here under this guy's elbow is the platform that the projector is sitting on. It's like 4 or 5 feet from the screen. This is a 100-inch projector screen right here. So even just from a few feet away, you can cast a very large image on a big screen if you have a short throw projector. If you have a standard throw projector, the projector has to sit much farther back from the screen, and then you have a problem with people getting in front of it and blocking the image projection. So again, that short throw, kind of important for our purposes. And then this is the biggie. If you try and use this thing outdoors, you're not going to be happy with it. It's just going to be washed out. People won't be able to see it. You've got to use it in a sheltered area. Ideally, that would be indoors, right? So if you have a venue where there is an indoor area for you to have your finish, I know this isn't a lot of places, but every once in a while we get to use a venue that does have an indoor building we can rent as the finish area for the finish table and results posting and so forth. That's the ideal place to set up the projector because the ambient light's going to be much lower indoors than out. So that's your best choice. Under a pavilion roof, that's your second best. The bigger the roof, the better, because you want a generous amount of shade, both on the screen and around it to reduce the ambient light. And then you can also attempt to do it inside a tent that has some walls that you can put up. If you can kind of block the ambient light coming in from the sides, you can try it in a tent. If you can't, if the tent is just a roof and the sides are open, again, you're getting into a situation where it's probably not going to work that well to be able to see the and the TV suffers from the problem too. You can't TV in the middle of the sun and expect people to see it, but it's a little bit more, the TV is a little bit more resilient than the projector. It's got better brightness and higher contrast than the projector ever will have. If you have the screen set up on a stand, a lot of people's projector screens come with a stand, either a single stand with a crossbar or two vertical bars that you kind of stretch the screen between. Either way, if you put that thing outside, the projector screen is big. It's like a sail, right? So if you get a good strong gust of wind, it's going to be in danger of blowing over. So most of the time, if you use a stand, it needs to be guyed out in order to be stable if you have any wind going on. Better than a stand is something like the arrangement that I'm showing here, which is just a piece of fabric as the screen. And at each corner, I've got a line with a stopper. You can actually see it, this little red guy right here, with a line stopper or a line tensioner that can fly out and pick up any kind of structure that's out there, vegetation or tent pole, or if you're inside, there's usually some kind of roof joist or column support you can use to guy it out to and then tension it flat. Down on the bottom side, you can tie the lines to chairs or benches or a cinder block or anything mobile that's got enough weight to it to hold a tiny bit of tension to stretch the screen out. So you got a little bit more flexibility there. It's these upper supports that need something to tie off to. But that generally works better, in my opinion, than a stand, just because you got a little bit more flexibility and a little bit more strength. Once you get the lines tensioned up, the screen's going to stay flat. A little bit of wind might cause some ripples, but it's not going to cause any problems for the projector. Light pollution is everything when it comes to projection. You've got to get the area around it as dim as you can. And that typically means being under some kind of support. The screen either needs to be indoors or it needs to be generously shaded. And by generously, I mean there needs to be a roof over it, and if possible, some kind of walls around it, or at least the roof needs to be so big that the open areas are far from the screen. Ambient light will sneak in from the outside and will start to wash out your image. So the more you can shade it, the better. This particular shot that I'm looking at here is from our event at Florida Ag Museum. As you can probably tell, we're actually in a barn at that at that location. It is an open-sided barn. The areas behind me as I'm taking this shot are open to the side, but down at the end of the barn, I was able to close the doors and get this kind of dimmer area that was ideal for setting up the projector.
Blake, I'm curious, when you're in an outdoor pavilion, have you found it practical to like hang curtains around the screen to make it darker?
Actually, I didn't point this out in the previous shot, but if I back up here, that's exactly what I did here. This is the same screen, right? I've strung it up from the rafters here, but in this case, you can kind of tell I put this black tarp. I've hung that up behind it to keep ambient light from getting to the screen from behind. And you could, in fact, do the same thing on the sides. If you wanted to, you could string tarps up that kind of come out and form a barrel, right, from each of the sides and kind of protect it from light getting in from the sides. The more you do that, the more you kind of restrict the area where people can be to look at the screen, but that often is well worth the trade-off. So the answer to your question is yes, absolutely, you can do that, and in some cases you have to. All right, screens themselves. This one is kind of a cheaper cloth screen that I tried first because I just wanted to try something basic. This particular one, a lot of the cheaper cloth screens that you can find on Amazon and such are sort of semi-sheer fabric, and as such, light can penetrate them from the back as well as reflect off the front. And so it's important to put a tarp at least in behind it to block light from coming through the screen from the back. And there's basically two kinds of projector screens you can find out there. The cheap kind is this semi-sheer fabric that really is just like a fabric. You can see you can wad it up in your fist right here. That's the kind of fabric it is. And then they often come with a border with eyelets in it for stringing the thing out. The advantages of a screen like that are they're very cheap. You can pick these up for $20 to $30 on Amazon. They're foldable. They're very forgiving. You can literally wad this thing up in your hand. It will not take a crease. You can dirty it, right? You could get it dirty, I suppose, but it's difficult to damage it because the screen it's just very forgiving fabric. It's stretchy, so it's easy to tension it out and hold it flat for the projector so there's no wrinkles in it. And because it's semi-sheer, you can actually, in theory, project from either side. You can project from the front and have the light kind of reflect off it. Or if you have a projector that can shoot a mirror image, you can project from the rear and have the screen, have the image show through the screen from behind. Now, in practical terms, for our use case, probably not going to get away with that because it will again, reduce the brightness and reduce the contrast of the image from the viewer's point of view. And that's the big problem for us, trying to view it in an outdoor environment. But in theory, in an indoor environment, you could do that. You could literally put the projector behind the screen where nobody can get to it, nobody can bump into it. That's a potential advantage. The downsides are all the visuals, right? These cheaper screens with the semi-sheer fabric have poorer reflectivity, which means they're going to be a little dimmer image and a little bit lower contrast image. And the fact that they're semi-sheer means that they can be washed out either by light reflecting off the front or light bleeding through from the rear. So if you want to use one, you really have to put up that opaque tarp or something behind it to protect it from getting washed out from behind. The other kind of screen you're going to encounter is this EVA polymer fabric screen, which looks, as you see here, it's sort of more of a plasticky feel screen that has a white reflective side and then a black opaque light blocking backing to it. The pros here are that it's going to have better reflectivity and contrast, so you'll get a better image. It has an integral blackout backing, so no light can get through from behind, just from the front. And it's less forgiving than the stretchy semi-sheer fabric, but it can still be tension flat, so it's not difficult to work with. The cons are it's going to cost you a little bit more. The one that I just bought set me back about $100. It has to be rolled. It cannot be wadded up. It cannot be folded because any fold will leave a crease on the screen. So you have to baby it a little bit by storing and transporting it by getting like a little PVC tube and rolling it up around it in order to protect it from getting wrinkles and creases in it. And the one that I found, that I actually bought it on Amazon, was just raw fabric. It was actually intended for like professional screen installers who needed to cut a custom size screen. They just give you this roll of raw fabric. And what that means is there's no edges to it. There's no bindings around the edges. There's no eyelets to tie it off. You've got to add those yourself in order to be able to string this thing up. So there's a little bit more work involved to it as well. I just got one of these. I just set it up literally a week ago and used it for the first time at the JROTC training camp that we run every year at Camp Joy Kelly Park here in Orlando area, and it worked great. This was a training camp, so it was set up indoors. I haven't tried it outdoors yet, but as soon as I do, I'll take some photos and share them around. So that's the end of that. That's all the stuff that I wanted to share with you on the Livelox front. I did promise you a look at a couple of little demo reels here. What I'm going to show you is a greatly speeded up version of an entire event that shows the tracks that everyone recorded. And this is sort of the showpiece of what Livelox can do if you have a big event where a large fraction of the people are recording tracks. This first one is from our Gold Head Branch event, which is a park just south of Jacksonville. It's a really nice park. We usually have an event, Gord, Suncoast Orienteering has an event there in November most years. And this was our last November event. We had about 400 people there and a whole bunch of them recorded tracks. And this is the fast forward version of what people did out there. Obviously, what you're looking at here is a multicolored one before we got the new feature with the all participants display. Oops, I jumped right into the second one there. So that one was multicolored, not class colored. Then the second one is our showpiece event at Silver Springs, the one that I've been sharing with you already, the one that I showed the heat map of. This one we had, again, over 400 participants, almost 300 of them recorded tracks. And this is displayed in class color. So this is similar. This is a speeded up version of what showed on the big screen at the event. You can see a few of those flyaways appear and disappear in various places, but most of them are very good. There was a nice triangular flyaway. Yep, and somebody driving away at the end. So just a 30-second version of a 6-hour event played back through Livelox. All righty, so let's go back to some Q&A. We've been at this about an hour, so we're pretty much right on time. Does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask?
I'm not seeing anything in the chat, so I'll stick around for a few minutes, I guess, if anybody wants to ask questions or comment. But thank you, Blake, for going through Livelox again. Hopefully, we can get some more clubs using the live tracking, or at least using the app to get more people to record. So I think that'll be my goal for next year, is to try and push using the app more, whether just for recording or hopefully for live tracking too. So
yeah, the live tracking is it's highly useful for event coordinators and event staff. And if you're also an outfit like ours that has JROTC, it's incredibly useful for the instructors at the event, because at every event there's always some newbies who end up staying out there longer than they should, get lost and whatnot, and the Livelox is a great way to track them down and get them back in a timely fashion. And these events are generally held on a Saturday. The instructors and the kids too want to get home. They don't want to spend all day out there, so a tool that gets them back and gets the award ceremony underway faster, that's something that's valuable to them. So they see the value in it. The instructors see the value in it. That gets them to kind of put some pressure on their charges to use the system as well. But it's also great for the after action training, the debriefing that they do in the classroom and so forth. That leg view in particular, fantastic training tool in the classroom, because they can show in a single click basically the way everyone approached a particular control and how those different approaches worked out. You can kind of zero in on what works and what doesn't in a way that you just can't do with any other approach, right?
Comment in the chat about using a smartwatch instead of carrying your phone. So the big advantage to Livelox is if you do have a smartwatch or a GPS watch, when you set up your account, you can link your Strava account or your Garmin Connect to your Livelox account. So every time you finish an orienteering event and you save your track to Garmin Connect or Strava, it'll automatically put it on the right course on Livelox. There's a few ways to manually upload a GPX track. There's instructions out there on Livelox itself, and then we've created instructions Orienteering USA has. So if you want to upload with the smartwatch, there's several ways to do that.
Absolutely correct. The only downside of using a different recording device than a smartphone is no live telemetry, right? Because the smartwatch doesn't transmit, doesn't talk to the towers, doesn't transmit telemetry in real time. So you do not get to see that on the live tracking display, but you can absolutely record that way and have it upload and be able to study it later, add your track to the repository for making a training resource for the event. Livelox is also, I should have brought this thing to kind of hold in front of the camera and show you. Livelox has started restarted, I should say. They used to have a dedicated small device that talked to the 2G cell phone network. That could, it was, a GPS logger, just like any garden variety GPS logger, but it talked to the 2G cell phone network and would ping that information out so you could get the live telemetry from it. And it was a smaller device, easy to carry, didn't mind so much if you lost it because it was only a $50 item instead of a $900 smartphone, right? Well, they've come out with a new version of that. The 2G cellular network is now offline in a lot of countries, so that technology that they were using is now kind of defunct. But they've released a 4G version of that now. I actually have one. I have a preliminary, like a prototype of it in my possession. Have not been able to get it to work on the US cellular 4G network yet. But that's another thing that I'm kind of exploring with Nats and the team at Livelox. Those devices are intended to be sold for around a $50 price point, I think. So individual runners could get them, clubs could buy them and rent them out. So there are potential solutions to the I don't want to carry my smartphone on my course problem that are financially feasible, a little bit less painful price point sort of thing. I will say that one of the reasons I sort of zeroed in on Livelox and treated it as the target system I wanted to use is the fact that it did use smartphone technology, which means it leverages the equipment that people already own. If you tell people they have to buy a Garmin watch, you'll get 5% adoption, right? Nobody will, only the diehards will do it. The general population will not. But if you can make it easy for them to use technology they've already got, that's when you get up to your 40 or 50 or 60% adoption rate or even higher, and end up with some really beautiful training resources for people to look at. Now, this does raise the problem of people losing phones on courses, and it does happen about once or twice a year. Somebody will ignore our advice. We are very careful at the beginning of every year to put out information about how the phone should be carried. We tell people use a runner's armband as the kind of the go-to method, but other than that, any kind of closured pocket, closure being the emphatic word, right? It needs a zipper closure, a Velcro closure, a pocket in your Camelback or your backpack that has a zipper closure. Anything like that is going to protect you from losing it. But every once in a while, somebody doesn't listen, they stick it in their pocket, and they fall out on the course, the phone bounces out of their pocket, and then they end up losing it, coming back to us, and their phone isn't there. Now, the good news is we've got a very good track record of recovering lost phones. And I have a document about that too, if anybody's interested, about the best practices for how to find a lost phone and what to do about it. But if they're using Livelox, then of course we can look up the track history that the phone was transmitting until it bounced out of their pocket and take them right back to it, right? In most cases, we can lead them right to where their phone is lying out there. The problem is that some people carry their phones for safety and they're not using Livelox, or their Livelox for whatever reason doesn't work on a particular day, and they lose the phone, and we don't have that resource. Even then, there are methods of finding it. You can use Bluetooth sniffers. Most phones have Bluetooth turned on to connect to earpods and cars and smart towers in houses and such as that. And there are Bluetooth sniffer apps that you can get on smartphones, and you can go out there with a couple of people, one person on each side of the person who lost the phone, following the track they think they went, and with two people kind of away from each other, you can sweep a lot of territory just listening for, sniffing for Bluetooth pings out there and find phones that way. In fact, the only phone we truly lost last year was one. It was actually at that Goldhead branch event. And in that case, somebody picked up the phone and stole it before we could get to it. They had dropped it somewhere, and somebody not affiliated with the event found it first. And they just pocketed it and took off with it. But that's the only one I can think of right away that somebody lost a phone and we didn't recover it.
Not seeing anything new in the chat, so if there's any last questions or comments, otherwise I might call this a night.
Okay. I've got on my, you guys can still see my share, yeah?
Yes.
This is one of the documents that Dylan referred to. This is the Livelox for club officials document. There's also a Livelox for participants document out there that I think, have posted the links to previously, have we not?
Yes.
Those are out there. We're continually updating them. Everything that I talked about tonight in the, you'll recognize this right here, about how to display live tracking and how to get to it and what to redact. All that information's out there in detailed form in the club officials document, along with a lot of other stuff. So you can always get to that out there to kind of remind yourself of what we talked about tonight. There are also other resources out there. If you're interested in having some signs for use at your event for starting and stopping Livelox, I've got some images for the signs that we currently use for that. Those are out on Google Drive as well. So if you have any questions about how to start using Livelox, how to make better use of it with your club, just ping me and look at the resources that are out there on Google Drive. We've tried to make a lot of information available to you to make this as easy as possible to adopt. All right, the rain and the wind are getting worse. I bet you can hear it now.
Starting to, yeah.
What's the cost of Livelox?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
The cost of Livelox is all to the user, and how much is it?
Well, for 2024, for calendar year 2024, we have the OUSA subscription. Right, OUSA has paid for a national level subscription, so everything is free. Livelox is 90% free to the user regardless, right? The only thing you pay for is certain premium features like Dual. Remember the Dual screen that I shared earlier, where you can look at your track next to the top finisher, let's say, and dissect out all the different bits of any given leg and see where you gained and lost time. That's a premium feature. If you want that, generally speaking, you have to pay a subscription fee for it. And there are individual subscriptions, and there are club subscriptions, and then there are national subscriptions. But for us right now, for 2024, we've got the national subscription. So everything is open. It's all wide open. Anyone who records a track at any OUSA affiliated club event in 2024 has full access to everything for free. And as Dylan mentioned earlier, there will probably be a process taking place in the not distant future where we're going to look at how much the system's being used and do we want to fund it for 2025, right? So I'm highly pushing this because I want people to use it in order to have ammunition to go into that discussion with and say, hey, we've got all these people using it, they're liking it, we should continue to fund it for another year or into the future or what have you.
So if it only takes a cell phone, the only reason we don't get better use of it is because if people don't know about it?
I think that's the case, yes. Like we can tell club leaders that it's available, and then the clubs can put the Livelox out there, but if they don't tell their participants, then some people aren't going to know to look for it. So, signage at events, getting the live tracking up so people know about it and people want to use it, I think would be the, next step to try and get clubs to do to get more people to use it. Yes.
Now, let's say the club didn't do anything. Wouldn't a competitor could do the whole thing himself, right?
Well, the event has to be set up in Livelox in order for people to use it. So there is a small amount of technological overhead at the club official level when an event is set up. They have to upload the map, for example, and the courses. So that event management screen that I shared earlier and was kind of scrolling around on is the finished product of what an event looks like. I don't want to give you an exaggerated impression. It takes 10 minutes to set up an event. Beyond the work of actually creating the map and designing the courses and all of that. You just basically upload the map from OCAD, upload the courses from OCAD. It takes 5 or 10 minutes to set up an event in Livelox, and that has to be done by the event staff, right? The club staff.
Okay.
Prior to the event. But after that, it's all about, as you said, knowledge and just awareness that the system exists.
Yeah.
And that's why getting that live tracking display in front of people's eyes is so important, because when you show them what it can do, people are excited about it, and they're willing to do that little bit of initial work of installing the app and setting up their account and so forth. It's a small investment, but if they don't know what it's for, they're like, it's just another app. I don't need that.
Okay.
And that document, the club officials document, has all of those details in it, right? So everything I just talked about how to set up an event and upload the map and upload the courses, that's all detailed step by step in that club officials document we already shared.
Okay.
Another comment about the subscription being applied to the individual Orienteering USA members instead of the clubs. Chose to go to the club route because it's a lot easier for management purposes. So if somebody wants to sit down and make sure every OUSA member has access to the premium subscription, feel free to volunteer for that. Yeah, right now the club subscription
don't
works.
volunteer for that. I'm
yeah
right now. Don't do that. We tried that route. I mean, 5 or 6 years ago when we started with Livelox, we tried to get people to have their own subscriptions because that was the model that was available 5 or 6 years ago. And we even, back then, you could talk to Livelox and buy a batch of club subscriptions, like individual member subscriptions, and then farm them out to individual people. And it was a nightmare. It was just a administrative nightmare. Almost no one did it. If you really want to get people to adopt it, the way to do it is to do it at least at the club level. Buy a club subscription, and then none of your people has to do anything. It's just available to them straight up.
Okay.
And again, anything except the premium features they can get to without any subscription at any level, right? If you set up an event in Livelox, anyone who does not have a membership, does not have a subscription, isn't an OUSA member, whatever, they can still record a route at that event. The only thing they can't do is use the premium features. And the premium features are basically dual and multi-track simultaneous playback. Right? So if they want to show their own track together with other people's tracks, or they want to see the big spaghetti movie thing that I shared where they see a bunch of tracks at once, they can't do that without some kind of subscription at some level. But most of the basic stuff, it's free. Anybody can get to it, subscription or no.
Any more last comments? Nothing new in the chat for a few minutes.
Yeah, thanks, Blake and Dylan, both of you, for organizing this.
Happy to do it. Want to see people use this system more.